Hello everyone, and welcome to Magma Ragers Episode 19. As usual, joined by Pandemonia, and we've got quite a bit of news to discuss this week. So we're going to jump right into that. First off is the Caverns Below Nerf. Do you want to just say hello and tell our viewers a little bit about the Nerf?
Yeah, so this got everyone quite excited because Blizzard announced that they were going to nerf Caverns Below. And basically, what they were simply doing is changing the number of minions. The number of minions that you have to play with the same name has now been increased from four to five. So initially, if you look at it kind of superficially, it doesn't seem like a massive increase. It's like, oh, just one difference. But basically, when you think about the ways you have to enable it, a lot of people, some people have written articles and people have talked on, and basically, it's more that it seems more like the difference between having one mana and two mana, where it doesn't seem that big a deal until you try it, and it's actually the difference between one mana and two mana is massive.
Yeah, it's also the
So I
difference in
think
this case
it's going to
between
be a
like
lot tougher.
one more combo piece and not having to have that combo piece, right? So when you don't have to
Exactly.
have the combo piece, you don't need as many pieces in order to actually finish the quest, then that makes a big difference, right? Now you need one extra bouncer, or if you're going on the flame elemental plan, you need one extra firefly, or a firefly and two igneous elementals. In some decks we're even cutting the one
And
igneous
even
elemental. So the deck was always slim on like having enough bounce effects. So now you have to maybe mimic pot into the right thing and then have like still three bouncing effects, or draw both versions of the thing you mimic pod and then you have two bouncing effects. So that extra combo piece that's required sort of just slows down the combo plan a lot. And really what that does is it makes the deck even more vulnerable to aggressive strategies, which is what it was sort of previously weak to. So that kind of is gonna, like, I see this as mostly just polarizing the matchups even more, right? But probably to the point where it becomes
yeah,
somewhat unplayable on ladder, as aggro decks will really punish it more heavily now. Whereas sometimes even when you got the nuts as the quest rogue, you could still sometimes beat aggro decks, especially if you're bouncing something like a glacial shard. But
whereas now
now
it's going
it's
to be much tougher.
yeah, it's gonna take like an extra 2-3 turns to probably find that combo piece, and that's in that time you're probably gonna die against aggressive decks. So, the deck might still see play in
But
some
also,
tournaments as like a control counter, but even there, you're still giving the control deck more time to, smoke you down, which some control decks can do quite well.
but I think also the thing is that with the quest rogue, the thing is against aggro decks like you're saying, even sometimes control, you'd have to sometimes use some of your bounce effects or some of your sort of more, let's say, defensively. You'd
Yeah,
have to sometimes youthful brewmaster something. Just so you can try and get an answer, or you'd have to play it out. And now you've got like in terms of managing your resources, now you've got to be a lot more careful in terms of you can't just play your novice engineer out, let's say just to draw. You've got to now think, okay, if I play that, there's almost no, it's very going to be very difficult for me to complete the quest on novice engineer, for argument's sake.
yeah,
You got to be a lot more careful. Oh, do I shadow step this now for because I'm desperate now, or do I have to save it? And even then, that the I think sort of the knock-on effect is now the extra bounce effect you have to use to complete the quest also means that post quest you're going to have less effects to do the ridiculous burst damage, right?
yeah,
Because now you all of a sudden going to have one less shadow step for the South Sea deckhand, one less shadow step for uh, the ball,
yeah,
and I think
yeah,
that I
which
think
makes a big
sort of that
difference.
knock-on effect that I think will make quite a big
Yeah.
difference.
It also, I think a lot of the time it's
I
probably
mean, how
going to
many times have you
involve
died to
like completing the quest now is probably going to involve using vanish a lot more often. Like sometimes you will complete the quest by
oh,
vanishing some of
good,
your own
really?
minions. Yeah, sometimes, but like more often than not, if things are going decently for you as the rogue, you'll find a way to complete the quest without vanish, and then vanish is kind of like a board resetting mechanism so you can get ahead. But now you're probably going to have to see the first vanish at least most
Yeah.
likely be used just to count towards the quest counter, like as the extra bounce effect, right? And that's pretty important as well because vanish is like an
So it'll
important
be
resource for the deck.
exactly, and it's it's basically one of its massive swing mechanics. Because that's like you say, that's the way you kind of reset against aggro. And I mean, especially against
Yeah,
decks like sometimes like I mean, like Token Druid that plays Living Mana, obviously Vanish is like the perfect answer to that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, even against, it's also like one of the perfect answers to Doppelgangster Evolve. So I don't really think the deck is necessarily dead, but it's obviously going to decrease its power level a lot, and certainly its viability on ladder, which is where it's been seeing some very good results. I think to me, like I'm kind of overall happy with the change, even though I was wanting to learn to play Quest Rogue better, as I still believe it was a deck with a pretty high skill cap. Even though sometimes it has a relatively low skill floor when the combo is obviously right in front of you. But in all those other times, the medium sort of scenarios and then the bad scenarios, it can have a pretty high skill ceiling. So I think it was a deck, that could have been pretty fun to learn to play better. But overall, I think the change is pretty good from my side because it is also about not limiting design space in the future, right? So they have to think about it anytime they want to print any like
And
cheap
also
value
making the game
cards,
more
right?
interactive.
Well, yeah. Also, just like if you're printing any cheap
Yeah,
value cards like Fireflies, now all of a sudden you have to worry about the like how silly they can get in Quest Rogue or something, right? Like Glacial Shard's a pretty good card, but it hasn't
yeah,
really
exactly.
seen that much play in anything outside of Quest Rogue because nothing else can really use it to, as strong an effect. Even though it definitely looked like one of the best sort of tempo aggressive cards from the set. So
Yeah,
yeah, overall,
and
I
it's pretty
think
good
I'm
when you do it like 10 times to somebody.
yeah, I think I'm relatively happy with the change, even though I am gonna sort of miss playing the deck a little bit. Um, you? Are you happy? I
Hmm.
imagine as a control player, you're very happy.
Yeah, I'm quite happy. I mean, the thing is, yeah, I was also, I played the deck a bit. I've been meaning to try and learn it to get better at it. But I just think overall, from the new play experience, I think this is a good move because the deck itself, I think as much as it has a high skill ceiling if you're playing it, I think the important part was playing against it was not the most fun or interactive experience. The thing
Sure.
is, you couldn't like it was there were very few ways of actually stopping the quest or delaying it, or because you just saw, oh, your opponent played something, they bounced it, oh, you can't stop it. you know,
Yeah.
uh, they, they play. I mean, okay, yes, sometimes you could try counter spell, but besides that, there was not many. And even if you play counter spell, your opponent could just bait out the counter spell and then play it, play the crystal core anyway, right?
Yeah.
So it was just a case of if you're a new player, you watch this going on, you're like, wow, this game is fun and interactive. Why?
Sure. I mean that's
That's
kind
the
of the
way
problem with
I see it.
any real combo deck. I mean, in
Yeah,
many ways,
exactly.
this is kind of a combo deck. It's not really an OTK combo deck, but it's a deck that just takes over the game in a
Yeah,
sort of unsurmountable way when it does complete its combos.
especially when it's turn
So
two or turn three. Turn three, when turn three, turn four, you're facing down a bunch of 5/5s, and even sometimes if you're an aggro deck, even then, you still, you then
yeah,
like, oh, I'm playing, cheap 1 minute like 2/2s and 3/2s, and oh, these are 5/5s.
yeah. Yeah, I know it definitely is a problem for like when it has those ridiculous draws when you get like finish the quest on turn like 3 or 4 and you prep it out. That's also pretty ridiculous. I'm not sure this is necessarily the best nerf they could have made to it. There was also a lot of
Yeah,
suggestion around just making the quest like take up a slot on the board. I think that would have been a huge nerf, simply just because very often you need that one extra slot to make a lot of plays. It would have also, I think, upped the skill ceiling and upped the skill floor of the deck as well.
yeah,
Also, if you make it non-preppable, that would have
yeah.
also made
Not
a
prep.
huge difference.
I would have honestly just thought the easiest, I think the best nerf kind of sort of let's say middle of the road. I would have thought would have been to make it non-preppable and occupy a slot. So basically, you play it like an enchant, like a creature, but it has no stats, right? So it just occupies the board,
Yeah,
and it remains like an aura. Or what they could have even done that I think could have actually been a nerf as well is simply allowed the the guys to be able to be silenced.
I think that's too slim though, because you simply will always run out of single target silences, and the only multi-target silence is mass silence from Priest, and like
Yeah,
that leaves too slim a way to counterplay against it, you know?
but
Like
okay,
knowing that it's limited to one class.
but maybe like that and something like and another small change maybe. Because I always
Yeah, I don't
thought
know.
like I just thought the whole fact that you couldn't silence them was very counterintuitive. Like especially the way the UI shows right?
Yeah, yeah, with the green stats if they've obviously
Exactly.
gone up from like 1-1s to 5-5s. But yeah, anyway, so I mean that's the big nerf that's been announced. Not really any idea when this is gonna happen, but I assume it's gonna be after Shanghai, which will be
But
this weekend.
probably still before. I suspect it will probably still be before the new expansion. I don't think it will be. I don't think they'll release it with the new expansion.
Yeah, yeah. Usually Blizzard don't like leaving very long for it to happen, and it's quite weird now, even that they've announced it before a major tournament, right? Because it just skews all the viewing perception about the deck, and it also like like let's say some guy wins on the back of some amazing Quest Rogue play, it's gonna be like, well, he's playing an OP deck, and like that's
Oh yeah.
that's not really the perception that they want to have. So the only reason I can imagine they've announced it at this point is either to silence the masses of Reddit people always complaining about it, or
So,
because
see what you did.
yeah, because they want to do it like almost immediately after Shanghai, and they don't want it to make it look like it's like a snap decision, based on Shanghai's results or anything like that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my best guess as to why it's gonna have like the nerf's likely to come directly after Shanghai. But we'll have to wait and see. So maybe even the next week we could see the nerf coming in, but don't
Also,
shoot me
I'm
down if
still
it isn't.
like I look at sort of at the decision in an ambivalent way. The fact that now obviously people are happy that they're listening to the community, and it's been a lot shorter. I mean, what Ungoro only came out in what 2 months ago, not even.
Yeah, something like that.
And the fact that Blizzard have already responded. So now the thing is like I don't like you can look at it for the one side. Okay, Blizzard listened to the community, great stuff. But now the problem is that that can be a good thing and a bad thing, right? Because now at any point in the future, the community goes, "Oh, we don't like this." Blizzard goes, "Oh, okay, we'll change it." Instead of letting the community try and previously we had to literally try grind and try. You would have to try every answer to it first and then realize it doesn't work and then they nerfed it.
I mean,
Now it's a case of they can just reflex, you know, the
what?
community goes, oh my goodness, that's overpowered. Blizzard goes, okay, fine, we'll nerf.
Yeah, yeah. That idea that like the community is going to be expecting Blizzard to change something if they complain, rather than the community actually having to try to fix the problem themselves in a way, like by coming up with more interesting counterplay or something like that. But like I think this kind of a time period is pretty decent. I mean, they gave plenty of time for people to work towards countering Quest Rogue, and largely it does get countered pretty well. There's quite a few decks that do pretty well against it. It has like very polarizing matchups both ways, so it's maybe a little bit surprising that it gets nerfed. But I think one of the major things that I see is that it also limits future design space. They might have been testing the new expansion and realized Quest
Yeah.
Rogue gets pretty silly with some stuff they've included there, and then all of a sudden, okay, fine, now we have to like it could be a nerf for an upcoming expansion. That is something you do sometimes see in
That's
these
what I
kind of
think
card
as
games.
well.
Yeah.
It's kind of a preemptive nerf of, like they knew there's going to be some other really silly bounce effect or, some really powerful one drop or zero drop, something that probably would have pushed the deck that much,
Yeah, like Murloc Tinyfin.
over.
Murloc Tinyfin would make the deck OP, right? Like
I don't know.
when
Well,
you
Wisp
a
sometimes
cute
see play.
5/5, oh,
A cute 5/5.
a cute
You
zero
can't, you
mana
can't.
5/5. Come on, like no one would be able to kill it.
Well, now, for
Actually,
example, you can
Murloc for
see
Tinyfin
why.
would be worse than Wisp in the deck because of the hungry crabs running around. But yeah.
But like even things like a target dummy, like you can almost kind of see why they're subtly, why target dummy is not in the, and like
Yeah,
the quest and target dummy are not in the same. So I think in wild. I think Quest Rogues are trying like things like target dummy and Annoyatrons because
Yeah.
yeah, two
Annoyatron
mana
is
five
pretty
five with one
annoying.
shell is pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
'Cause
I mean,
yeah,
people
like
put
a
Tar
better side
Creeper
win
in the
two
deck,
mana.
and it's like that's just better.
like like on like next level better.
Yeah, yeah. Anyway, so
So
it's good to see them at least making changes if they feel they need it. It's always very difficult to say from our perspective. Blizzard have a lot more stats on the deck's performance and stuff to
they
determine
also
if
know a
it's
lot what they
really.
plan.
Yeah, yeah, and they obviously know what they're planning. So I think that this is also with the future metas in mind, and for that reason, I'm okay with it. I'm just hoping that it isn't just an indicator that they hate combo decks altogether, and that they hopefully give us some combo decks that the community won't hate, because personally, I enjoy playing those kind of decks.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's constantly a Blizzard. I mean, they say but the problem is, I think they've said they want combo decks like Silence Priest. So I mean, yes, that's kind of a combo, but it's not the combo in the sense of Patron or Quest Rogue or original Miracle.
Yeah, they don't want
I mean,
combos
Quest
from hand,
like
or they want them from
OTK.
board. Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. They don't want a combo that you just hold 10 cards and then you just win.
yeah. Well, they did Prince
So
of
it'll be
Exodia
interesting to
combo
see.
essentially, so, and I'm pretty sure they would have known that that is happening because that was pretty easy one to come up with in the Quest Mage. But
But
that deck's
super
just not
slow
good enough.
though. I suppose
Yeah.
that's the thing that's good. It's
If
the
the meta
slowness and the
if the
fact that you
meta
need like
gets
five
slow
cards.
enough, right? Because now they're responding
So,
to the Quest Rogue nerf, maybe Quest Mage becomes a thing to counter that kind of a slow
becomes the
meta,
counter,
right?
right?
Like
I
Quest
mean,
Rogue was kind of doing
yeah.
that job, and if you really wanted a full control counter lineup, you could play Quest Mage. It just does pretty poorly against actual aggro decks and mid-range decks.
I
So
mean, in terms of your decks to check control, to check control, it's basically Jade Druid, Burn Mage to a degree, I think, and then like
uh,
mid-range Paladin, may like a little bit, but not that heavily, I think.
yeah, Miracle Rogue still does okay at checking
Oh yeah,
control.
Miracle Rogue, yeah.
So I mean,
But
Miracle Rogue overall has some relatively similar matchups to Quest Rogue, just not as polarizing in them.
and
So
also the deck itself is more interactive, right? Like I think that's the
yeah,
major thing is the actual gameplay.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, anyway, so that's
So
enough about the Caverns nerf. Next on our agenda, we have the pick your champion. So as we've mentioned a few times already, there is the Shanghai Spring Championship coming up this weekend, and as is tradition for these events, Blizzard have allowed people to pick a player, you vote for that player, and then depending on that player's performance, you get card packs. So if the player wins, you'll get four card packs. If they come second, you get three, basically, I think. And then it
I
sort of
think you get
scales up.
four as well if they make the final.
Oh,
Usually
okay.
it's like the way
And
they do it is you get one pack, I think, guaranteed. I think.
well, I think it's basically the number of packs equals the number of wins they get. I don't know. Oh yeah, yeah. You get
It
one free pack. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, you're right. You do get one
you get
free
one
pack,
free
sorry,
pack.
for just choosing your champion.
Then then
Um,
the second one is if they get to the
And then
top
each
eight
time your champion advances in the bracket, you earn one more card pack.
advances exactly.
So when they get out
And then I
groups, you
think that
get
by the
two
time they reach the
packs.
final,
Yeah, when you get out groups, you get two
yeah,
packs, and then it's top eight, and then top four it's three packs, and then the final it would be four packs.
yeah, that's what I'm
So what
saying.
you
So
want is
whether
a
your player
player
comes
that's
first or second, you get the same.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I'm pretty
Yes.
sure I had Frozen for the last one, and I mean he came second
Yeah,
in
and I
the
got
end,
max
so
packs.
yeah. It worked out for me. And I mean, Frozen I just chose because I enjoy his stream and stuff. It wasn't the most educated decision, but this time
Yeah,
round
I just
I
basically
have
got
a
I got win with Frozen.
yeah. This time I have a slightly different strategy. But first of all, do you want to tell us about your strategy for picking your champion?
So I did sort of a briefly because the lists were recently announced. So basically, I just went through sort of the basic the people's lineups and obviously which groups they were in, and I kind of because I mean the main thing is you don't really this is I mean if I think like you and I we've got most of the cards, so we don't really need the packs. For us, this is more sort of a puzzle, kind of like a puzzle or riddle that we try to just solve and see if we can
Yeah.
solve the system.
I think
And so,
there's two different ways to look at it from my perspective. There's the way that's like support who you like, which is kind of what I did with Frozen last time, and then it's like added incentive to cheer them on, right? And I think that's a large
yeah,
portion of what this whole pack idea is about. It's to get more casual people interested in the championships and to get them cheering on a player. And it's also like for other players that want to try and predict who wins, it's like a slight reward if you can somehow predict who's going to win or get to the final, which is kind of how I'm approaching it this time. But sorry, you were saying about how
so,
you
so yeah.
chose yours.
So what I say is I looked at the lineups and like I mean I didn't do a hectic stats analysis. I just briefly looked. So what I actually, even though initially I suggest when people ask me, I suggest pick one of the EU guys. When I actually looked up, or actually say EU, Muzzy, or Ant were kind of the guys I suggested. I actually went for none of them, and I actually decided to choose Cornet. And basically, the reason I picked Cornet is because when I looked at his group and his lineup, he brought a basically all control anti-aggro lineup, and the rest of his group, they're all good players, but all of the players in his group brought mostly aggro lineups.
Yeah.
And so basically that's kind of the reasoning I went with, because if I looked, I think it was RDU. RDU's in the same group as Ant, and so they're both really good players. But if you look at their lineups, they have very similar lineups. So, for example, when they play, it's going to be very relatively coin flippy as to who wins the different mirrors, right? A lot of
Yeah.
the time, or who gets the right Q, who gets the right Q. So then it's a case of they're both good players, so it's very difficult to put your money on one or the other.
Yeah.
So that was my sort of strategy.
Sure. Sure. Basically, you picked Coronet because he has almost the most expensive deck in the tournament, right? In that control paladin at like
Yeah.
14k dust. Only mages is like 120 dust worth more than his. It's kind of like control and mid-range paladin are kind of the only. It's really, I'd say, the only real very expensive deck in terms of dust right now. Most of the
Yeah.
others are hovering like
Or the Inzoth ones
four to six
particularly.
thousand. Yeah.
The Inzoth
Well,
because then you run
Kuronets
Ken
doesn't
and
even run Zoth, but Mages is running in Zoth.
yeah.
Yeah. But
Oh, just actually, I was going to bring on to like the later comment is the fact that actually, people say wild, like all the wild decks. So this is what we're going to we're going to talk about it later. But all the wild decks are actually cheaper than the standard decks.
yeah, yeah,
A
which
lot of
is
them
quite
are actually
interesting.
very cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean that's just I think also you have certain like really powerful legendaries like Sun Gibatarium is and Tyrion are kind of the part of the reason that a lot of the Paladin decks are expensive as there's not many
Yeah,
decks that don't run those two at the bare minimum.
exactly. Yeah.
Um,
Tyrion, Sunkeep, and some of them run Bristle, and then a lot of them run Curator.
yeah, yeah.
So, I mean,
So yeah, they tend to stack up a few more legendaries, which obviously skyrockets the cost, as well as just even things like Murloc War Leaders and Vile Fin Inquisitors and the more aggressive paladins, right? Those are all
yeah.
like epics as well. But that's a little bit off topic here. So yeah, so your kind of strategy was basically just taking a brief look, seeing whose decks you kind of associated yourself with,
No, no,
and
actually, no,
also
no, 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 no. Actually, not. I went with
you
more as a case of who could beat the other's lineup.
okay.
So so
But I
that was
mean
kind of
like
the fact that it coincides with my own preferences is a bonus, right? But
sure.
that was not the goal. The goal wasn't let me go pick the guy who picked, four control decks. It was more a case of pick the guy who looks like he's favored against everyone else's lineup.
Sure.
And I mean, most of his decks are all tech towards anti-aggro. So I mean, to beat aggro. So that was another sort of
Yeah. So he is in. So Kuanet is in. So let's just go over the groups first. Let's talk a little bit about the groups, because that also highly determines who you want to vote for. Like if somebody's in a really tough group, you're probably going to be less inclined to vote for them, right? So let's go over the groups first of all. So we have Group A, Nyria, Muzzy, X Hope, and Citizen Napa. So I mean, X Hope, for those that don't know, he performed pretty well at the last championships in the Bahamas.
yeah,
So he's become a lot more well known. He also won the EU versus CN.
He won the
and won
Ferrari.
won the Ferrari there. So he's actually been doing really well, even though at first he didn't necessarily look like maybe he would be a top player.
Yeah.
Like there was some dodgy stuff in the Bahamas, some dodgy plays. Yeah, dodgy
Yeah.
stuff sounds a little bit wrong, like as if he was like cheating or something. But it's just maybe some dodgy plays and curious lines that he's taken. But he's been relatively consistent, so there's got to be something there. He's obviously preparing and performing well enough. And so I'd say Group A is a pretty tough group then.
Well, I
Citizen
mean,
Napa, the
Naria
one.
as well. I mean, Naria is obviously one of the more consistent EU players as well.
Yeah. I,
Uh,
I mean, Citizen Napa is probably the only one that's like not that well known there.
and even
Uh,
him, I believe he's actually quite well known as well in other like the other circles.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm
But
just saying to like the majority of people there, right? He's
yeah,
he's not
exactly.
really that well known. Obviously, Muzzy is becoming a lot more known now, but he's kind of one of the most prominent names in North America.
He's been known for a long time.
Yeah, but I mean like to the wider community, right? I'm not talking about like to you
Yeah,
and I. Like obviously I know pretty much all these players except like Kuanet was probably the only unknown one, maybe Diego Diaz. But like
Diego
we
Diaz.
know pretty much all these players before. It's just like to the wider community, Muzzy's becoming more well known now because he hadn't really had any like massive wins or anything before. He was just a very well known player in the pro community. Whereas Nyria, he
Yeah, I
was at
think
the world
so.
champion at the world champs in Bahamas. Well, not the world champs, the seasonal champs in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
So returning now, like he's I'd say definitely one of the most known players in the tournament. Um,
Oh yeah, Naria.
and
And also the
yeah,
fact that I think what's it two uh he's the only player at the moment to two consecutive seasonal championships, I think.
no, X Hope was also.
Except consecutive. Was he at the last
Yeah,
one?
yeah, X Hope was in the Bahamas.
Okay, so him and
So I mean, Naria is the only one from the
from
West.
E
Well, from the
from the
West as a
West.
whole, right?
Yeah.
So Americas and Europe. But X Hope was also there, and I'm pretty sure Jason Zhao was too, wasn't he? He was also at the Winter Champs, wasn't he?
No, he was the one before.
You sure?
He
Okay.
wasn't at the Omega Zero was at the last one. Jason Zhao, I think he was at BlizzCon, remember?
Oh yeah, yeah. Jason Zhao was at BlizzCon.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
okay.
think so. He was had like a gap basically.
Yeah,
But yeah, still very still known. He's becoming also more and more well known.
yeah. So
To the West world because he's popping up in all these big tournaments, right?
yeah, so Group A is a really tough group. Like, and for that reason, I think it's somewhat hard to pick anyone from that group, to be honest. Like it makes it a little bit harder to pick somebody from that group. So then we have Group B, Hoy, Kranich, Kuonet, and Dog. Dog
Those are
came
also
second
once
at the
again all
EU
good
versus
players.
CN. Yeah, like his plays were also somewhat dodgy or like um, not optimal at EU versus CN. So I wouldn't be voting for him almost purely based on that reason, is that I don't believe he's one of the best players there. But his results have shown that there's obviously something there, right? Um,
Yeah.
and then Hoy is like a pretty well-known, consistent player in the European region. Also not necessarily
Yeah.
had that many big breakouts, but he was on like a pretty big team before Navi, and now with Planet
He was also
Odd.
did quite well like at like DreamHack. I think I remember the one DreamHack. He was like I remember he was like I think 9-0 or 11-0 with Secret Paladin. I remember for some reason I remember there was a DreamHack and basically he was just like destroying everybody with Secret Paladin.
Ah, yeah, I don't really remember that. But yeah, I mean, he is pretty well-known player. And then there's Kranich, who has been at both of the last World Championships, the last two BlizzCons, so one of the few players to do that, and coming back now for the
And
Spring
one of the
Tournament.
more dedicated and innovative aggro players. I'll tell you.
Yeah,
He's known for like innovating decks like okay, as silly as it sounds, Face Hunter. Like he's
yeah.
still I think like there was last season or
No,
this
no, it
season
was it was
he was
this
still
season's
pilot
champs. He played Face Hunter for his
and
regionals.
even on ladder he was piloting like he was like a weird Face Hunter variant to like top 10 legend,
Yeah,
know.
yeah. No, Kranich
So
is definitely like
he's an
not a
aggro
player to me.
god.
Yeah, I've actually played Kranich before. In
Did you win?
online each. Yeah, I did. It was in the
I
semis of a
know.
tournament. Anyway,
Oh.
um, Yeah, so he's not at all sort of limited to the APAC region. I'd say he's probably one of the most well-known and strongest players in that whole region because he's been competing in
Yeah.
the EU and American side of things for a long, long time. Since
Yeah.
BlizzCon like 2014, I think. So yeah, I mean Kranich is a very, very well-known player. And then there's Kuanet, who was your pick as well
Yeah.
in
Who's
that
actually
game.
not that well known, but like I say,
Yeah,
it
it's
was
sort of
mainly
one of the
because like
up and coming players from this.
uh,
Yeah, but I mean, Hoy and Kranich are both known for relatively aggressive strategies in general. Like Hoy tends to, I'd say, favor mid-range more than just like pure aggro decks, but they're very much like on meta players. So they will play what is
yeah.
good in the meta, which is obviously generally a pretty good way to play, and also why they have these recurring results. And then there's Group C that has Mage, Trunks, Calento, and Diego Diaz. So Trunks is also relatively well known in the Chinese scene. Like he sort of perf- uh, performs fairly often, like fairly well, fairly often. He's was also in the EU versus CN, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Yeah.
So all the Chinese scene have a totally different qualifying system, and it's pretty grueling. So they tend to get
And it's really confusing as well. It's like
yeah,
qualifier into qualifier into qualifier.
yeah, so they tend to get pretty sort of top players from there. So it's not too much of a surprise. I think there's a little bit, like you get a little bit of a head start if you've done well in previous ones. It's a little confusing, but yeah, anyway. And then so it's Mage, Trunks, Calento, and Diego Diaz. Mage is pretty well known in the American scene, weirdly enough, because he mostly, takes part in that ladder, on the NA
Even though
ladder.
he's from Australia, isn't it?
Yeah, he's from Australia, but he mostly
Yeah.
plays on
Or
that
New
ladder.
Zealand.
Like, no, he's from Australia. Citizen Nappa's from New Zealand.
Uh, uh,
Yeah,
I know they're from Australia or New Zealand.
yeah. Um, I think it's that way around.
I think Calento is obviously one of the most, I would have to say, one of the most well-known players in Hearthstone for a very long time. And even though he took a break,
Yeah,
I think he took sort of a break from competitive Hearthstone for a while.
yeah,
He's shown he's back and he's, also doing really well. And he's back into the serious side of things.
yeah, yeah. I think he's found that he's kind of said that he's been enjoying uh, the like meta a bit more these days, and that's also why he's come back into more of a uh, competitive scene.
Competitive.
Yeah. Sorry, so Mage
Yeah,
is from New Zealand, Citizen Nappa's from Australia. Those two
close
flags
enough.
are very, very similar and very, very easy
That's
to
what I'm
get
saying.
confused,
Exactly.
especially when they are these like tiny variants that we can see on Hearthstone here. So yeah,
Yeah.
um, that's also. I mean, all these groups are pretty tough, but like I wouldn't say picking Calento based on just purely on his reputation is necessarily a bad choice here, as he should hopefully be able to get out of his group. But all these players have some pretty tough groups. And then finally, Group
Yeah.
D is Jason Zhou, or Zhao, Ant, Trebs Red, and RDU. So Ant also
Also, once
been a
again, I mean, all of these groups are quite stacked, right?
yeah. I mean, you would expect so. It's a long qualifying process to get to these spring championships, but Ant is a player that's been well known in the American scene for a long time. Also like a long sort of been around for a very long time as a pro there. RDU generally more well known to the larger audience as a whole. He's done well at lots of dream hacks before on G2, sort of one of
Or
the
mainly, I think
best
it was
performing
because he
teams.
he won one of the earlier Hearthstone Dream Hacks. Like I think one of the first ones.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well
I think
he's
that's
won.
also why he.
He's hasn't he won? He's won multiple dream hacks actually. He's won
I think
two.
so, but
He's
I
one of the
think
few
the fact
players
that he
to win
won
two.
one of the early ones,
Yeah, yeah.
that very first one against, I think it was against Mars, if I remember correctly.
I'm not sure, man.
There was a back in the day, back in my day.
Oh, old man Pond remembers.
Yeah, no,
Uh,
that's why. No, but like I say, because he was one of the earlier ones to win
yeah,
it. That's why people remember you, right? And then
yeah.
obviously from that, he built his entire career into the pro that he is now.
Yeah, and he was also like a bit of a like prodigy at that stage. He was pretty young at
Yeah,
that stage. I think it was like what 16 or something when he won his first DreamHack. So
yeah, he was. Yeah, I
he was one
remember
of
him,
the
and he
early
always like,
youngsters. Now he's grown up a bit more in the scene.
He's like one of the
As well.
veterans, you know.
Yeah.
By
He's an 18 or 19-year-old veteran, or 20, or however old he is now. Still pretty
exactly.
young, but
I mean,
a
him and
veteran.
Thias are actually both very young, but they're both essentially veterans of the Hearthstone scene, right?
Yeah, yeah. And then we have Trevsred, which is a Japanese player. I was surprised not to see a few more Japanese players qualify from the Asia Pacific region, as there seem to be a lot more competing now. And Japan has traditionally been a country that's been very strong with card games. So it's good to see more of them getting interested in Hearthstone. And we saw B787 last time, and now
Yeah.
Trevsred. Trevsred also like I think he has played on the NA servers previously, so he's been playing longer than let's say the APAC servers have been, or the Asian server has been a thing, I think. Um, so yeah, I mean definitely not a player to be underestimated, but to be fair, I'm not putting my money on him. I mean in that group I'd have to put my money on RDU or Ant to be honest. I think they also just have
Well,
the better
yeah.
lineups against
But even
their
Jason Zhao. I
competitors.
mean, even Jason Zhao.
So
I think
so
Jason Zhao's also.
if I remember correctly, in this group, RDU and Ant have like pretty aggressive decks, and Jason Zhao and Trebs Red have decks that are both pretty weak to that. So and
Well,
like
no.
it's
So the thing is, Trends Red and an RDU all have like quite aggressive lineups, right? So like Ant has Token Druid, Secret Mage, Evolve Shaman, and Pirate Warrior. That's an all aggro lineup, right?
yeah,
Uh, RDU has Token Druid, Control Burn Mage, Evolve Shaman, and Pirate Warrior. Treads Red has Secret Mage, Malokadon, Quest Rogue, and Pirate Warrior. So a relatively aggressive lineups. In that group, Jason Zhao's got Jade Druid, Midrange Paladin, Quest Rogue, and Jade Shaman. So he's got a very quite
yeah.
a
He
mid-range to slower
he
line.
is a very very bad person to put your bet on because to be honest, it looks very tough for him
Yeah,
to get out of that group. So these groups
he's
are
gonna get.
essentially GSL style groups, so there's double
Yeah,
elimination groups. So from the first pairing, the winners will play each other, and then the winner of that qualifies out of the group. And then the losers of the first round of matches will play each other. The winner of that will go on to play the loser of the winners match. Um,
yeah,
and then the winner of that game will
yeah,
be the second player that will qualify from the group. So basically, you need to win two games,
twice.
yeah, and at
Yeah,
most you can lose once, pretty much. So yeah, that's how the group stage works. So for somebody like Jason Zhao, it's going to be very difficult for him to win
because
twice
a
with
lot of
his
his
lineup.
lineup is very. Yeah, because I mean, if you just look at his lineup, it seems to be quite susceptible to aggro. And he was obviously, judging from his lineup, he was hoping to queue into control lineups.
Yeah,
Just
somebody
looking
like
at the way
Kuonet's
his
lineup.
lineup. Well, exactly, because I mean,
Yeah,
yeah, I just look at Jade Druid, Midrange Paladin, Quest Rogue, and Jade Shaman, and I'm like, yeah, if you play control, you're in a bit of trouble. But
yeah.
so
Basically,
yeah,
he's brought an anti-control lineup and that's not
uh,
really going to work for him
his
that
entire
well.
group is quite aggressive.
Yeah, but I mean, Ant and RDU in particular, right? They don't
Yeah,
have Quest Rogue in their lineups, and Trebs Red has Quest Rogue, and that Quest Rogue is going to be the big deck that matters for Trebs Red, right? That's the deck that he needs to get past Ant and RDU, and if he can't get a win with that deck, which is not necessarily that favored against all of the decks that RDU and Ant have, then you'd expect
yeah.
RDU and Ant to get out of that group, not based on reputation, but based on just purely the lineups, to be honest. So but they're both pretty good bets, even for the whole thing, because their lineup should line up pretty well against other people, and I'd say they're almost guaranteed to get out of groups, almost as guaranteed as anyone is. You know?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, that's one of the things I was looking at them, but I was like, for me, it was a case of because there's so many players with similar lineups in there. I was sort of a bit more hesitant to put my money on one player, so hence why I decided, good old control lineup. But yeah, I mean, you make a good point. Like in that group, RDU and Anton. I mean, RDU has obviously that reputation, like we're talking about. But yeah, poor Jason Zhao, I think he's a good player, but I think kind of, sort of the way the draw, the way the draws fell, don't like his lineup. If he gets out to the group stages, it might be good for him.
yeah.
right? I mean, if he somehow gets out and then faces or I mean, if he faces someone like Nyria, for example, with Taunt Warrior and Jade Druid, he might be in a much better position.
Yeah. Yeah, but it's going to be difficult. I think I'm still going to have to sit down with these and calculate exactly who comes up against who and who's likely to win. There have been some pros that have done stuff like that. Like Noblord did a review like that, trying to predict who is going to win. I think he came out with Mage as one of his top picks, which I know is Zamok's pick, even though he's not here tonight. And the other alternative is going with people that never get it wrong, and one of those people is Reels, who has so far gotten 100% for predicting all the way back from like Pavel winning, or I think it was like even from Oskako winning the
Really?
champs.
Okay, I did
Yeah.
not know
So
that.
so he's gotten a 100%
Oh wow.
record so far in his predictions, and he predicted Hoy. So if you just want to go with that, considering Reels does actually work for Blizzard, not that that I think has any influence, but
It's
he
not info,
does.
right?
So if you want to just go with copying somebody that has a good success rate, then Hoy could be your man. So um, yeah, I mean, Reels has gotten not just like 4 packs every time, he's gotten the winner right every time. And that's
Yeah, which is really
yeah.
impressive.
And I mean, I'm sure he put effort into trying to predict rather than just, let's say, luckily guessing now because he wants to keep that record going, right? Not many people have that record, so he wants to keep that record going. So now you care
Hashtag
about getting
Illuminati
first.
confirmed.
Yeah,
Conspiracies confirmed.
yeah. Yeah,
Game
so
is rigged.
yeah, so Hoy is a good pick. I mean, there's quite a few good picks here. I'd say top of my head, Hoy, Mage, and RDU would be sort of my top 3 picks, which is difficult for
Hmm.
me because, like, I'm a big Muzzy fanboy, but his group is really rough, so I'm very hesitant to pick anyone out of that group A.
uh, poor Mazzy. Uh,
Yeah. And obviously your pick was Kuonet, but any
yeah.
other, let's say, 2 maximum other notable names that you would suggest for people to
I
pick?
mean, RDU would have been a kind of a player I would have gravitated towards. I mean, Kalento, but I think Kalento's group is also quite. I mean, like guys like Naria, that like sort of let's say gut feel, I would have gone with like RDU or Naria
Yeah.
because of their consistent performances historically. So I mean those, but like I said, I mean basically I think I'm going with like kind of a dark horse. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
So you
Sometimes
can
we'll
feel
see if
better if
that
you're
works.
right.
Exactly, and I don't feel as bad if I'm wrong, right?
Yeah, yeah. Win-win, except, in terms of likelihood of guaranteed packs, which is apparently not what you need anyway. So, yeah, I think we've given people
Pack's always nice.
yes.
I
Uh,
mean, free pack's always nice, but I mean, yeah,
yeah, we've given people a fair bit of insight into this, so hopefully everyone's feeling a bit more informed as to picking their champion. Um, there's one other important thing that's going to happen over the weekend at the Shanghai Champs, other than obviously the tournament, which is probably the thing I'm most interested in, uh, and that is the announcement of the next expansion. So, as is tradition, Blizzard have done the announcement of the announcement, announcing that they are going to be announcing what the next expansion is on the 6th of July, which is the Friday leading into the Shanghai to the Shanghai tournament, Shanghai Spring Champs.
yeah.
So we're gonna, I imagine, get some cards revealed over the weekend, and we're gonna start getting the card reveal flowing in. And obviously we will bring all the news next week Monday. So if you don't have time, you have a busy weekend, you can always tune in next week Monday, and we'll be discussing the new expansion and the cards that are
It's
released.
always quite exciting
Yeah,
because then
I mean,
they'll probably discuss some of the mechanics and like those sort of things as
yeah.
well.
The new this I must say I'm definitely far from bored of this expansion. I know some people are, especially people that play, pros that play a lot of Hearthstone. It's hard for them to balance when like it's hard for Blizzard to balance for those people and the people that haven't even had enough time to try all the different archetypes and decks that have come out of this expansion. And there is still some like newer stuff
Yeah,
being worked on. So it's not like
yeah.
innovation is kind of dead and it's gotten very stale, but more new cards is definitely interesting and definitely something that I'm looking forward to.
And it's also, I think it's good. It's just a case of as it's starting to let's head towards that plateau. I mean, yes, we're still seeing some newer decks being innovated, but it's slowly starting to sort of stabilize. And just as that, then things get shaken up with the nerf and with the new cards, which I think is good. And I think this is exactly just as things start to sort of stagnate, you shake it up. And I think that's because I think what we've seen in the past is the period of stagnation was a bit too long, I think. Like, and most notably during the times of mid-range shaman, where it was a quite a long period of time. I remember where mid-range shaman was just the deck.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, now we're seeing a shake-up even before the expansion, likely with the nerf and to the caverns below, as we spoke about earlier, and then we're going to see the expansion. I imagine not too long afterwards. I'm hoping they announce it and they're like, it's going to come in like 2 weeks or something, you know? Um,
Well,
so,
last when did the last year's August expansion come out?
I mean, this is
I
obviously
think
this is gonna
it's
so for those that don't know, this is gonna be a full card expansion. Like they're not really doing the adventure only adventures anymore. You know, these are always gonna be full card
yeah,
expansions, so we can expect something around 130 cards, I imagine, with a
yeah,
pre-order for packs. And when the
probably with a
uh,
card back.
yeah, with hopefully with a card back. I mean, there was the one time they didn't do the card back for what was it? Mean Streets of
Yeah,
Gadgetzan, they
I mean
didn't do
the
a card
card
back.
back.
I was like, what? No, I'm not pre-ordered. That's the only time I haven't pre-ordered. I was like, why would I pre-order? Uh,
You wanted their card. You wanted their card back.
yeah, card back, man. Can't miss out on the card back. So yeah, I imagine we'll get the usual bonuses as well as the no duplicate legendary thing will start coming into effect then in the packs,
Yes.
as well as the sort of 10 free packs that people will get. So, you know, everyone can, I imagine, is going
Yeah.
to be pretty excited for this, and we're going to have to wait and see what exactly Blizzard are going to be announcing.
Well, just out of interest, last year, One Night in Karazhan was announced on July 28th, and it was released on August 11th. So what? That's about 2 weeks later. So it's very possible that you're right.
Yeah.
Or it could just be a case of they announcing it earlier and then they release it more at the same time.
Yeah,
So
I
it
would
could,
say 2 to 3 weeks is probably, you know, barring any development hiccups, is the likely time period we would expect the release in after the announcement. You know, it's usually a week or two at least of hype, and they give cards to streamers to reveal, and
uh,
you know all those kind of things, and
yeah,
that's definitely something we're gonna see a fair bit of before we get
yeah.
uh,
And crossing
that
fingers,
sort of.
they've gotten over like because some of the previous releases have had a lot of hitches and lots of issues. So I think slowly Blizzard are getting better at this whole releasing expansions and releasing cards. So hopefully, if you go back, we've had things from servers just crashing, not being able to open packs. Then there
Yeah.
was
I mean,
what means
like the thing is the load increases so much over the expansion launching time, right? Like
exactly.
as everyone's like maxes out, the like server load just increases exponentially. So hopefully they kind of have some metrics, you know, as to what to expect, and they can actually scale up their servers as is necessary.
Yeah,
But yeah, even then, even when they scale up their servers, whether the actual service they're using can handle it is another story. Because I mean, Blizzard is, you know, 70 million users or whatever. It's a large number of users with a large number of transactions happening on that day in particular.
yeah. So it'll be interesting. I mean, and also actually game-wise bugs and glitches and things. I mean, if you remember the mean sheets of Gadgetzan, there was those pack bugs in I think NA
Yeah,
where guys were opening way too many. What's it? The class card, the faction cards.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah,
Hopefully EU gets the expansion at a relatively reasonable time this time.
yeah.
Last
We
time
usually get
it
like a whole
came,
day later usually.
yeah, it came out like so much later, and obviously I only buy packs on EU, so it feels bad, man. I played like a little bit on NA when it came out, but my NA account is like super free to play and barely got any cards, so it wasn't very feels good, man. But hopefully this time I'll at least get 10 packs, I think. I think it'll be
Yeah.
for all my accounts, so yay. At least have some cards and be able to play around with a few things when the expansion
Oh,
launches.
yeah. And that's always
So
thing.
start saving your gold, obviously, everyone. That's
I think that's a
that's the
good.
important thing. It's if you haven't started saving already, definitely save now. Especially if you are free to play. This,
And also,
I
even another thing, if you don't urgently need cards, even any packs you currently get, I would suggest holding onto them and not even opening them, because the obviously the as I understand the Blizzard did announce that basically the packs would be the contents are decided when you open them.
Yeah,
So therefore, if you keep them and don't open them now, when you do open them after the expansion releases, they'll be subject to the no duplicate,
legendaries rule.
the new then legendary rule. Yeah, exactly, which is
Yeah,
obviously much beneficial. So I mean, even and that even applies for that the Ongoro special, which they currently have on
yeah. So if you
the packs.
are not in a rush to open the cards, you can even buy that special and not open them. I would almost find that impossible to buy, let's say, 80 packs and not open them. That would be physically impossible for me.
And it's
I am
just yeah,
struggling
it's like
with
OCD.
two
It just
Tavern
sits
Brawl
there.
packs. Just two Tavern Brawl packs, and I'm
Yeah,
struggling. I'm struggling not to open them.
and that number is two because it's
Yeah,
two. It's not
it's
zero, right?
it's two. That's
It's
some of
like
the
having
worst parts before
it's
the
it's as
expansion. When you
bad as
pre-order and you've got the damn pack sitting there and you're like,
yeah, 52.
can't open these. That's so annoying. Just hide them away. Like, I don't want to
It's as
know.
annoying as
What are you putting my Christmas present right in front of me for? Like, sealed, and I can't open it, but you're just keeping it in front of me every day. That's mean.
it's like giving it's like having an email notification that you have like three messages unread and you can't get rid of that notification. You know,
Yeah.
you can't make the numbers like for me. Like even if I don't actually read the message, I need to get rid of that number that says
Yeah.
you know you have two messages or three messages or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, I have one inbox I've totally given up on that has like 1,000 unread emails now, just from like 2 months of ignoring it. But at some point, I'll just click all, mark read. Cool. I don't care.
Just to
But
make
yeah,
you feel weird.
yeah. If I ever need to use
All
that
right,
email address, now I just don't go back to it because there's too many unread emails. Anyway, aside from our OCD
yeah,
tendencies, there is
yeah.
one more other piece of news for us to cover, and that's that.
Or two small pieces.
Yeah. So firstly, the wild expansions are going to be returning. So all the wild sets are returning, in fact, which means you are going to be able to buy the adventures and you and play through them in game. Well, you can play through them in game, but the adventures and packs for the old sets, the old expansions, you will be able to buy on through the Blizzard website. So not in the in-game store, but through the actual website itself. So obviously they just made that concession to sort of free up the UI a bit in game. Uh, it's pretty important because this kind of coincides with Wild getting some more love in terms of tournaments and stuff that we'll talk about a little bit later. And they obviously want to uh, give players a way to um, catch up on wild cards if they're more interested in playing in that format, let's say, than the standard format.
Yeah, also because I think it's still because the meta is more diverse, and you know, like it's not. I think it's still a fair bit away from solved, shall we
Yeah.
say? So I think that's why some people like, you know, what the whole wild idea.
Yeah, I think it's largely just because there's a lot less players playing Wild, a lot less information about the meta that it becomes
Mm.
less solved less quickly. Because obviously the amount of cards coming into it is a lower percentage of cards, right? If all these
Mm.
cards were still in the still if there was no standard and wild, I think it would be a very like stale meta. Um, the rotation has definitely been very good for Hearthstone, I would say, but people haven't really
Yeah,
solved what the meta is or what the meta should be or what the optimal decks are and all that kind of stuff in wild because there's just not enough people playing it to reach that critical mass of thought and experimentation.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like Vicious Syndicate have started doing wild reports these days as well, with
I
some
think in
accumulated
collaboration
wild
with
data.
the subreddit.
Yeah, along with the Hearthstone Wild subreddit. Um, so yeah, there is starting to become more information about Wild. Yeah. And do you want to go over the last piece of news?
Well, basically, it's just the fact that there was the wild open. We didn't chat about the wild open, did we?
Oh no
Did
no
we?
no, but that falls under our esports section, which is a whole separate
Uh,
section that's about to come. I mean, this was just the last bit of news about the Wild sets are returning. But
right.
but yeah, that is a good segue into the Wild Open, which happened over this last weekend. So this kicks off our esports segment for this week. Once again, a busy week in esports as we are leading into Shanghai Spring Championships this in the coming weekend. And yeah, so Hearthstone Wild Open, the sort of first Wild event that happened. What happened
Yeah,
was it was the top 64 players from each of the servers. So EU, NA, and I think China, Asia, and then I think China had a different qualifying system. I'm not actually sure.
as usual.
They usually have their own weird systems. So anyway, the top players qualified into another qualifying tournament, and through that qualifying tournament, we ended up with the top eight that played in this Hearthstone Wild Open that happened on Saturday and Sunday over the week. And we saw very different names to what we see in our standard meta. The only sort of
Yeah.
one of the main recognizable names I would say is LVGE, Chinese player that's also done well in some standard tournaments, and also I think he
Mm.
also was played in the EUCN. We're starting to recognize a lot more of these Chinese names more often now as they
Yes,
venture
they're
more
popping up
into
over
these
and over
Western
again.
tournaments. Yeah, yeah, and they're popping up over and over again. So on a side note, I think it's great that the Chinese scene is growing so much. It's great for the health of the game overall. Um, and there was also some sort of more wild specialists, I would say, or people that are more well known for being wild specialists, like Control the Board, or as he was just going by in this tournament, Control, who plays for Fate Karma. That he pretty much exclusively plays wild. So,
And he's
it's
like regarded as like the wild card, basically, as I understand from like I've heard of him and all the guys
yeah,
basically were he was one of the favorites, I think.
yeah, yeah, definitely. And so, let's just go over the full eight players that were in it. So it was Masink played against LVGE in the first round. SH Royal Blaze, I think that's Baze. I don't know how to pronounce that. Uh, played
Basie,
against
Base, I don't know.
yeah. Played against Control, and then there was Elb 987, who played against Noragoon, and then McNuggets that played against Burtek. So in the end, we saw Control versus Elb 987 in the final. Both of these players are actually wild experts. I didn't really know that much about Elb, but after the results, I saw a lot more people speaking about him, and maybe I don't know if he's necessarily a first language English speaker, so maybe that's probably why we don't see him as much popping up, in streams because he has maybe a more niche audience that he can reach. Um, and yeah, he is obviously a wild expert as well. He was managed to take it in the end over Control um, with a 3-1 victory. And so, a big congrats to all those players. Definitely interesting to see what decks are also popular and wild. Uh, Pirate Warrior,
Yeah.
unsurprisingly, being quite popular, with four of the eight players bringing Pirate Warrior. Uh, and
Aggro Druid also being quite popular, I think.
yeah,
I mean
for some reason they
basically
split it between Token and
four
Aggro Druid, but they looked really similar when I was
I
looking
think
at
they're
the actual
basically the
deck
same deck.
lists. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not
Yeah,
actually sure what
sometimes
the split
Hearthborn
is.
does this weird thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes they do a weird thing where they're basically the same deck, they make it like two different names.
Yeah. And there was also, I mean, there was six priests as well. Um, very few rogues, only the one crystal rogue, uh,
Yeah. No
and
hunters.
no hunters whatsoever, and two Reno locks being the only warlocks that we saw. Um, so
Five warriors basically.
yeah, most of which were pirate warriors.
Yeah, four
Um,
pirate warriors and one fort warrior.
and what would have, amazed some people if you'd asked people at sort of let's say the turn or the introduction of wild, how many decks in a wild open in like a year or so will contain Dr. Boom? I think everyone probably would have said every single deck, but only 5 out of the 32 decks actually having Dr. Boom, as pretty much proves too slow for some of these decks, to be honest. Your aggro
Yeah.
shamans and pirate warriors and stuff, Dr. Boom's a little bit slow for them, um,
And
which
even
is interesting to see.
interestingly,
I
decks
mean,
that were like
patches and more.
ridiculous, like sort of were super strong back in their day. I mean, people worried that Wild would become infested with mech mages and secret paladins. And if I look at these lists, not a single mech mage. I don't even think that's sort of regarded as a competitive Wild deck. And
Yeah,
secret paladin as well. It's all mid-range paladins. I mean, what kind of actually caught my eye the most is actually Mac Nuggets' burn mage, which is basically he ported it obviously from standard, and then he added in some sort of really like the sort of obvious cards from Wild to it. So Mad Scientist and Azure so basically what he added in, and Doctor Boom.
yeah, Doctor Boom. So there's one deck that does easily find space for Doctor Boom, just on curve and like a
Yeah,
mid-range deck there. I mean, Doctor Boom's like a
exactly.
good like a better Violence portal, right? I don't know. It's also like, yeah,
Well, the deck
so
runs double
coincidence.
finals portal as well.
I know.
Just enough
Um,
the deck runs double finals as well.
yeah, yeah. So definitely an interesting deck. I also think there was quite a few of these OTK priests that we saw in the qualifying tournament before this, and they seem to be popular in particular with the Chinese players. And we saw here LVG had the combo priest, which I'm not sure if that is an OTK deck because I actually didn't watch much of this Wild Open to be honest. And I'm not really very familiar with Wild, but it is a tournament that happened, and therefore we
Yeah.
are bringing coverage of it, as is our promise to bring to keep everyone,
It looks
all
like
our
it's
viewers
a.
up to date with the. Oh, okay.
He's
So that
kind of
yes,
got like an interesting angle.
this was the one that
He's kind.
uses the
He's got Divine
light
Spirit and the Inner
wardens,
Fire combo, but he's also got Light Ward. No,
the
he
light
doesn't
of the
have Light
Naru.
Wardens.
Nobody has light
I
of the
don't.
Naru, which
Yeah, he has
gives
Light
him
of
the
the
light,
Night. But
which gives him the light warden, right?
but he what yeah what he has is he also seems to have the Orkanai Soul Priest with the ability to zombie Charles those shenanigans.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I think
Yeah, it
yeah,
seems
it's
to
kind
have
of it's,
quite a few combos, but it's not like a from hand OTK like we saw previously the Ginny priests in particular.
oh yeah
Being
yeah
like
those
the
Unity
it's not that kind of a like OTK deck. But it is a combo deck, right? So I mean,
yeah
quite interesting. I mean, Control also had like a combo priest. Bertic also had a Lyra priest, whereas it was Noragoon and uh, Royal Baize that had the OTK priests. So that's not really what I would have
it's quite
expected
good
from
to see
priest.
these decks
Honestly,
though.
priest seems more interesting to me in wild than standard, but that's probably just because they all have the
Yeah,
word combo
exactly.
written there.
You just saw you just saw that and you were like, oh my goodness, I'm in love.
Maybe I'll do my golden priest in wild.
Hey, not a bad idea.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was the Wild Open. As we said, Ulb 987 from Italy managed to take it in the end over Control. Uh, it was definitely interesting, the little bit that I did get to watch of it, seeing very different decks in play. And it's good that Blizzard are supporting the format, for those people that are more interested in this. It's very important for card games like Hearthstone to have multiple formats and have them supported. So hopefully next we can get some kind of a limited or sealed format, hint hint arena or like some kind of draft or something along those lines. That's definitely the format I would be more interested in and or more hoping for than let's say a wild format.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, like you say, the if they start introducing more diverse, more supported. So like if Wild and Standard get equally supported, because currently, Standard is still the most supported by a mile.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know,
I mean,
and
I'm
so
not talking
it'll
about
be
like,
interesting to see if they can support.
yeah, like you don't need to get the limited and the wild formats to the exact like level of standard because standard, I mean, Hearthstone is one of the biggest esports in the world, so you're not necessarily going to get multiple formats in that
Yeah.
level, but at least having a place where people can be dedicated specialists in a different format and still, make a living and be professional at that.
Exactly.
Yeah, so
But yeah.
then there was one other tournament going back to Standard Life that happened over the weekend, and that was Lifecoach's
Standard
Summer
line.
Mansion. which is a invite tournament that he hosted, but there were some qualifying players that qualified through some like Strivewire Open qualifiers. I think one of them was Al Machio or Al Machiko, who qualified through I think it was a 512 man open qualifier, and as it turns out, he actually was able to win the whole tournament, taking down Powder in the final. So I saw his game with Camlan, and I wasn't all that impressed with his gameplay, but he managed to squeak through. And I think it also shows you what, how much more dedicated sometimes the qualifying players can be over the invited players, right? Especially a lot of these players coming off the back of
Yeah.
Seed Story Cup last week, and then they've had maybe other tournaments that have been taking a little bit of their focus, so they might not have been as prepared for this. And I think for a lot of them, it's also just a really fun tournament. There's like pool parties, and everyone has a lot of
Yeah.
fun at this because it is a house cup. It's a very chilled environment, and like seat story, but just in Lifecoach's house, kind of thing. So yeah, I think it's an important breakthrough, for a player like Al Makiko to win a tournament like with so many notable players, beating Pavel in the semis and then
Exactly.
Powder in the finals. It's a great result for him. So I'm happy for him that he's made it. And there was also
And also a chance for him to get noticed.
yeah, and we also
A chance for him
saw
to like kind of
yeah, sorry, go on.
yeah, we saw.
Like
No, I
other
was just saying,
uh,
the fact that he beat notable players.
yeah. Yeah, sorry, go. I think there's a little bit of lag between us. That's why awkward silence paused. Um, but yeah, you were saying he beat notable players.
Yeah, but also like I just find it interesting is the fact that in his road to the final, Powder beat his opponents far more convincingly, and then he lost in the final. Whereas if we look at Al Machiko's, he beat Camland 4-3, he beat Pavel 4-3, and then the final was 4-3. Whereas
Yeah,
Powder beat 6-0, 4-0, he beats Mr. Good 4-1, and then he unfortunately loses 4-3. So I think if you actually look at his record, he might actually still has a better like
yeah,
win
definitely.
percentage than
Yeah,
Almachico, but obviously the direct is what matters, right?
yeah, but I mean, in the end, Almachico had kind of just a favorable lineup over Powder. It looks like, having Jade Druid against Powder's much lower lineup with the Control Paladin, Freeze Mage, and Taunt Warrior. I mean,
Oh wow.
Jade Druid definitely helps there. And what was quite interesting about this tournament as well was the actual format. So it was best of seven conquest, but instead of banning your opponent's decks, you got to self ban. So you could just ban whatever's the worst matchup against all of your opponent's decks. You can't ban one of theirs; that you have to only self ban your own. So this makes it a lot more interesting when it comes to like targeting, right? You can't have a strategy that just targets Quest Rogue, as we could see pretty much all the players here that brought Quest Rogue, except for Mr. Yagut, who is a Miracle Rogue specialist. And this is because Quest Rogue has bad polarizing matchups, but if your opponent has a full aggro lineup, you just ban your own Quest Rogue, and then you don't have to play it, and then you can get a win. So, it's very difficult to target individual decks because the players can just self-ban those decks, and that actually makes this format
As actually
quite
dynamic.
interesting. Yeah.
I personally would actually like to see more of like this is an interesting format. I would actually like to see more of it to see, what becomes of the strategies, And currently it seems like just bring the five strongest decks,
Yeah, but very
or
often,
bring like
yeah, very often in like an unsolved format, it can be like that, where people just like, oh, I'm just gonna bring strong decks, right? And hope that somebody else hasn't solved the format, just a lot better than I have.
yeah. Yeah, because I mean, we see some people seem to have brought sort of like a balance. So like we see a lot of the lineups consist of like Quest Rogue or Jade Druid, and then something like Pirate Warrior as well. And basically I think you can kind of see some of the idea was okay, some of my decks I want to be control with, and then some of my decks I want to beat aggro with, and then whichever let's say whatever lineup my opponent's playing, I can then kind of ban the one that's obviously weakest.
Yeah. Or you can bring something like, let's say, three. middling consistent decks, decks that can do decently against aggro, decently against control, and then in your other two decks you bring a deck that's super anti-control like Jade Druid or Quest Rogue or something like that, and then you also, as the other deck, bring a deck that's like super anti-aggro, maybe like Taunt Warrior or something like that, and then you can kind of balance it where if your opponent has an aggro lineup, you can soft ban your anti-control deck to just maximize the percentage of your whole lineup against theirs,
Agreed.
or if they have a super control lineup, then you ban your anti-aggro deck. So there's definitely a lot of
Yeah,
like interesting lineup strategies that change a lot with this, especially as well with it being a best of seven, which is not something
yeah.
we commonly see that much anymore. Even with the World Championships now switching to, or sorry, the Spring Championships switching to a best of five instead of best of seven.
Because best of seven, I think, is just very long and grueling, and that's also when the whole, mental endurance and just having that stamina kicks
Yeah.
in.
Especially at a tournament like this when there's also a party going on at the same time whilst you're playing, I can imagine.
Yeah, that must be the tough part, right?
Yeah. It's like all these people partying and you can't go join them. Feels bad, man. Yeah. So I mean, we saw quite a lot of Rogue at this tournament. Pretty much all Crystal Rogue except for um, Yagut's Miracle Rogue, um, and quite a lot of Shaman as well. Unsurprisingly, mostly the evolved Shamans. So yeah, I mean, pretty sort of decent splits of classes. Just Priest only one Priest deck, and no
No
Hunters
hunter
and no
and no
Warlocks.
warlock. So six classes decently represented.
Yeah.
I
I
mean,
think
you
this
see
also
that.
comes down to just the format, right? Wanting to pick decks that are just
Yeah,
on average strong against various things, I think is kind of what you want to do here. And
yeah, and that's
Hunter
why
really
you
doesn't really fit
see
into
decks
that,
like.
neither does Priest.
I mean, that's why you see a lot of burn mages, a lot of mid-range paladins, a lot of evolved shamans, decks that have kind of a reasonable spread all around, right?
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
I mean, like you say, this particular format favors sort of middle of the road decks because you can't afford to target a deck because, oh, your opponent, oh, targeting their quest rogue. Okay, well, I'll just ban it myself.
Yeah. Yeah. So definitely an interesting format and be like I think that was the most interesting thing about this tournament to me. I didn't really get to watch much of it, but definitely an interesting twist on the conquest format, and hopefully we can see some more like this. And I mean, it's always great, even though Life Coach is not necessarily focused on Hearthstone as a player anymore. He's still contributing to the community, which has given him a lot in terms of stream viewership and all these kind of things. Not that he really needs the money, as is evident by his mansion, and the fact that he never really took subscriptions or donations anyway on his Twitch channel. But I think he still likes the community and it's just especially a lot of the other players that he obviously became friendly with. So seeing him and JJ is nice again, even if they are a little out of touch with the Hearthstone meta, based on their casting over the weekend.
uh,
But yeah. So I don't know if there's anything more you want to say on the Summer Mansion or
I
anything else you want to
think
say
we've
before
covered
we sign
most
off.
of it.
Anything
I
else you
think,
want to say before we sign off?
yeah, I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Well, it's been quite a long episode, quite a lot of news to catch up on. So thanks for joining us. We will be back again next week to bring you all the breakdown of the new expansion news that we're expecting. Definitely looking forward, and also the happenings that at Shanghai in terms of esports. So like, subscribe, follow, do all those kind of things, and you will find out as the video goes up. And also, like, subscribe. Oh, sorry. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at DalePon for Pandemonia there, and at Dib_gaming for myself. And then you can find out when we're live and also when the videos go up on YouTube. So thanks a lot, everyone, and cheerio.
Cheers. Cheers. Oh, that was quite a long